I don't know about you guys, but I was in my hotel room today, and I'm working on this film Unplanned. I'm part of the marketing team. And I was lying in my bed thinking back to seeing Freedom Tower lit up in celebration of infanticide a little more than a month ago. And when they first signed those bills into law, I shrugged. This is a good sign. They know Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned, so they're preparing for the inevitable. And it didn't impact me. But when I went to Drudge Report, and I saw Freedom Tower, this symbol of America rising up from radical terrorism, lit up in celebration of killing our own children, it broke my heart. My wife, when she came into the house, she saw the look in my face and she began to cry. She said, "Who died?" She thought someone in her family died. And I could not leave the house for 3 days because I was so depressed. Because that has the names of those preborn children and thousands of Americans have fought and died since. My brother, my son, and my best friend are all infantry veterans, my best friend with 3 Purple Hearts in the War on Terror, and they took that symbol and they lit it up in celebration of infanticide. But you know, evil is a deprivation, it's an absence of being. And evil always overreaches. That symbol that rocked all of us will be remembered as the beginning of the end of abortion. Because in the 2 weeks after Governor Cuomo ordered Freedom Tower lit up in celebration of abortion, there was a 10% swing to the pro-life side. So thank you very much, Governor Cuomo. I really appreciate that. And Students for Life, for me, I've had a relationship with this organization really predating Students for Life. I was just thinking about this at the table. Tina Whittington, who is tremendous, and she's a lifer in the movement. I met her in 2000. When I was in Washington, D.C., I just graduated from graduate school and moved to D.C., and I had tickets to an inaugural ball for President Bush. But I also heard that a group called Rock for Life was having some straight edge concert. And I was so excited to go meet Eric Whittington and Brian Kemper, the founders of Rock for Life. And I was so nervous, and I went up to their booth and I met Eric and I met Tina, and I met them in 2000. I first met Kristen Hawkins in 2006. We were just finishing production of Bella, and the producer of Braveheart and The Passion of the Christ and the executive producer of Bella, Steve McAveety, called me and said, "Jason, you need to go to take over the Get Out the Vote effort in Missouri for the Say No to Amendment 2 campaign. They're down by 32 points. And I said, "Well, they're going to lose." He said, "Well, you've never lost." And at that time, I'd run campaigns, I'd never lost. I said, "Yeah, I don't want to have an L on my record, so I'm not going." And he said, "Well, you can ask William Wallace. There's some hills worth dying on." And I was a newlywed, but I flew to St. Louis, and I met this radical young activist, Kristen Hawkins. And we were arguing the whole time. I remember leaving this church and going into the rain, and I had said something really offensive to you to get your goat. And you looked at me like I was crazy, and this big smile. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be working with this young woman for the rest of my life. I remember I met Maddie Schulte in 2010 in Wisconsin when she was just a 15-year-old student in high school. And Lauren is a friend, and my newest friend, Jalem, that guy needs to run for Congress. I met Jalem today.
After he works for us.
After he works, look at Kristen Hawkins. After she works for Students for Life, he works for Students for Life. I met Jalem today. We went and did kickboxing, and then we prayed the rosary in front of Planned Parenthood. So that was a good day. So a lot of people think that my journey in the pro-life movement began with the movie Bella. But it actually began 30 years ago this week. In a real way, it began 30 years ago this very week. And it just dawned on me now. In the fall of 1988, toward the end of football season, 2 days before my 17th birthday, on a Saturday morning, my high school girlfriend rode her bike 5 miles to my house. And I was lying in bed half asleep. It was a boys' room with football posters and helmet and shoulder pads and strewn on the floor. And I heard someone creeping up the stairs to my room, and I thought it was my little sister. Someone sat on my bed. I opened the door, and it was my high school girlfriend. And the first words out of her mouth were, "I'm pregnant." And I woke right up. And the two of us spent that Saturday trying to figure out what we were going to do. I had a football in my hand since I was born, and I dreamed of nothing more than going to the University of Nebraska and playing football and then going on to play for the Chicago Bears. I can see an Oklahoma fan over there. That's all right. Forgive me. And, but I knew things were going to change now. So Katie and I came up with a plan. And the plan was that on my birthday, which was in 2 days, I'd go down to the Army recruiter's office and try to join the Army. I knew of a program because my buddy just dropped out and joined the Army. And Katie said, "I'll wear baggy sweaters and take vitamins till you get back. And then we'll tell our parents together and have a family." And so on my birthday, I walked down to the recruiter's office, clean cut, leather jacket, and wasn't going to tell him, you know, my secret. I just said, "Hey, I'd like to join the Army. I'd like to get in the next basic training class. I know this program where you can go in right now in the middle of your senior year." And he looked at me, and in my leather jacket, he said, "I don't think you qualify." I said, "Why not?" He goes, "This is a program for delinquent children." And I said, "Well, out of 565 kids, I'm last in my class." And he like kind of got interested. They have quotas, you know. And he said, "Tell me more." I had 80 hours of detention last semester. I told him some more embarrassing things, and he said, "I think you qualify." He said, "If you get your principal to sign this and your mother to sign this, we'll get you in the next basic training class." So I took it to my principal. She looked at it. She looked at me. "If I sign this, I'll never see you again?" "Never." "Have a good life. It's going to be hard." My mother was a single mom, lots of kids, and I think to this day she thought I was just looking for attention. She signed it. A couple of weeks later, on a Sunday morning, my recruiter came to pick me up. They had to send me to Georgia earlier because I needed to get my GED. And my recruiter looked at my records. He said, "I don't think you can pass the Illinois GED, but you'll pass the Georgia GED." Flying I hope your biggest donor's not from Georgia. That's all I'm saying. The recruiter said that. I'm just saying. So he picked me up. Well, he called me. He said, "I'm going to pick you up at 9 a.m., Jones. You need a suitcase with your toothbrush, toothpaste, razor blade, socks, and underwear. Be ready." And I ran all over the house looking for a suitcase. And I remember panicking because I had a family to prepare for and support, and I couldn't find a suitcase. We didn't went anywhere. And I called the recruiter and I said, "Sir, I don't have a suitcase." And I remember thinking, they're not going to let me join the Army. I don't own a suitcase. And he said, "Just use your pillowcase." I'm like, "Oh, good idea." So I grabbed my pillowcase. So I went into my room, and my pillowcase was a Scooby-Doo pillowcase. So I went into my sister's room, and it was strawberry shortcake. So I went with Scooby-Doo, put everything in there. Recruiter picked me up, and off I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. Had to take the GED first, and I did pass, you know, flying colors. Went into my basic training class, and I was in the infantry, so basic training and AIT were together. Advanced training and basic training were all together. And, you know, I really was excelling and excited to be an infantryman, like my dad and my grandpa and his grandpa before that. And here I was now, an infantryman in basic training. Things are going great the first week, and Sunday rolls around, and the drill sergeants say, "I need 2 formations. If you're Catholic, get in this formation. If you're Protestant, get in this formation." And I had never been to church a day in my life. And I remember thinking, what am I? I have blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm probably Protestant, so I got in line with the Protestants. We marched to this beautiful Episcopal, it was a good guess, right? Lutheran or something, I don't know. I look Lutheran, right? What would you guess I am? Well, I'm kind of red-faced. You might think I'm Irish. I am that too. So we go to this Episcopal church. I have to confess, I have ADHD, as you can probably already tell. And sitting still is not my strong thing. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to church again. That's never going to happen. So we marched back, and the next Sunday rolls around, and I knew what I was going to say. So they're like, Catholics in this formation, Protestants in this formation. And I said, drill sergeant, I'm an atheist, and there's a separation of church and state, so I'm just going to stay back here and relax. I didn't say the relax part, but I had visions of me alone in a bunk. And the drill sergeant said, that's great, Private Jones, you're right. We can't make you go to church, but I have been looking for somebody every Sunday to clean the pots and pans. Congratulations, pots and pans boy. Get to the kitchen. So every Sunday when the other soldiers went off to church, I got pots and pans detail. But for me, it turned out to be a great luck because I discovered that behind the station with the sink and the hose where I had to clean the gravy for the biscuits and gravy, which was a really daunting task, there was boxes of ice cream bars in the freezers that we wouldn't get. And I would pack buckets filled with ice and stick the ice cream bars in there and smuggle them into the barracks. And then when the soldiers came back from church, I would say, who's going to shine my shoes on Monday? Ice cream bar. Tuesday, ice cream bar. Who's polishing my brass? Ice cream bar. Who's making my bed? Ice cream bar. So one day of extra duty meant I didn't have to polish my brass, shine my shoes, or make my bunk. All basic training. Now, Father Peter's giving me a dirty look. I caught that, Father Peter. Because he's thinking that's stealing. Well, first of all, I was an atheist, so. We've all seen that Seinfeld, I think. And second off, in the Army, that's not called stealing. I know there's some veterans in the room, that's called securing. The ice cream was left unsecured, I took care of that. And basic went along, IT went along. My girlfriend sent me letter after letter. Each letter meant 10 push-ups. But do you know, I was so excited because I came from a broken home. My father was really not in my life till I was 6 or 7. My mother was married several times. With each man came all the trouble you could imagine, and a new kid, which was great, but the trouble wasn't. And when all my siblings and I would go through these hard times, as 5-year-old and 6-year-old, what I would do is go to my room, lie in my bed, and daydream about the kind of father I would be and husband I would be and the kind of family I would have. And so I was, believe it or not, very excited. And you'll hear people say that young people who get in crisis pregnancies are doing it because they want someone to love them. I think that's untrue. Because from my own perspective, thinking back, what I wanted was not to be loved, but I wanted to love a child the way I knew a child deserved to be loved. That's all I ever wanted. That was my dream. And I was living it. So it was 2 Sundays before going home. I was in AIT, Advanced Individual Training, Advanced Infantry Training, getting ready to go home. We were really just cleaning and getting the inoculations for our specific duty stations and doing paperwork. The Sunday rolled around. I was cleaning pots and pans, waiting for my chance to secure ice cream. When a young man, I'll never forget this guy, he was an Irish traveler, and a really interesting guy, and he was in my platoon, and he had desk duty. His job was to answer the phones and stand out in front of, sit in front of the battalion at this desk. And he came running in and he said, Jones, you need to come out here and answer the phone. Your girlfriend called and she's crying. So I ran out and I answered the phone. And Katie was crying like I have never heard anyone in my life cry, before or since. And the only way I can explain it to you is that her soul was crying. And she kept saying over and over and over again, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, it wasn't me. And then her father said over the other line, I know your secret, and your secret's gone. I took Katie to get an abortion. And it was 30 years ago this week. A drill sergeant hung up the phone because I wasn't supposed to be on the phone, obviously. I hit him. Another drill sergeant grabbed me and pulled me into my captain's office. My captain was a very big Army Ranger, and I just kept yelling, call the police. He killed my baby, please call the police. And my captain picked up the phone and he said, Private, explain to me what happened. And as I explained to him what happened, he looked at me confused. He said, why would I call the police, Private? Don't you know that abortion is legal? Now here I was, a high school dropout who was last in his class. I didn't know anything about anything. And I did not know that in our country, I did not know that it was legal to destroy the most precious and vulnerable members of our family, our own children in the womb. But I got a C, I think, in 7th grade biology. I knew that the biological beginning of the human person was fertilization. I knew the basics of development in the womb. And although I was an E1 private making $300 a month, it was not above my pay grade to know that we protect our children from violence. My captain, I'm guessing, was a Christian, and he was pro-life, I'm guessing, because he was very sympathetic. And he gave me a Cliff Notes explanation of abortion, and he gave me a roll of quarters. And he said, you go to the PX, the store off away from the barracks, because I can't have you disturbing the whole battalion, and you just go comfort your girlfriend. And I walked to the PX, and I called Katie, and I didn't comfort her. I listened to her cry through a $10 roll of quarters. And I would say something, just trying to stop her from crying. And after an hour and a half of putting quarters in the phone, the mechanical voice said, you have 30 seconds, please deposit more change. And I had no more change. And I remember just thinking, say something to stop Katie from crying. Just say something. And my mind raced, and I just blurted it out. I said, Katie, I promise you that if it takes me the rest of my life, I will end abortion for my daughter Jessica. And the phone went dead. And we know that our baby was a girl because the abortionist who performed her father took her to his friend, her Catholic father, who happened to be very close personal friends with Cardinal Bernardine. Her father took her to Chicago Masonic Hospital, and the doctor there, after performing the 3rd trimester abortion, said to her, by the way, you had a little girl. So I'm not good at commitments or promises. It's Lent. I forgot yesterday and ate steak when I took that long flight from Hawaii. New Year's resolution was I'd get down to 210 pounds. I was 220. I'm 230 now. That's how my commitments go. That's how I do it. But I thank God that He has given me the grace now for 30 years that the first thing I think about when I wake up every morning, I promise you, is protecting women and children from the violence of abortion. And the last thing I think about when I close my eyes and go to sleep at night, every night, is protecting women and children from the violence of abortion. And I know that that's by the grace of God, even though for my first 13, 14 years in the pro-life movement, I was an atheist. So even all those years, God gave me that grace, and I'm very grateful for that, probably with little Jessica's intercession. When I got to my duty station, Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, I was eager to keep my promise. And I didn't know where to begin. I went to my post library, and there was a book called Roe v. Wade in Focus, published by Planned Parenthood. That was the only book I had. And I read it, and I didn't know anything. So my mother's the type that if you knock on her door selling anything, Shackley vitamins, encyclopedias, Jehovah's Witness, LDS, whatever you are, you will get in the house. And she will keep you. You will never get out. And you will never make a sale. But she'll have had company for the day. So I had to grow up with this, you know. But it taught me that you can knock on strangers' doors. And so I knew what I was going to do. See, I didn't think America knew abortion was legal like I didn't know. I thought it was a secret. And if people knew, they would agree with me. So I went to my first door on Lakeview Circle in Waihua, right outside of Schofield Barracks. And I knocked on doors. And I remember one of my first doors, I knocked on the door, and this guy said to me, "Go away, Howley boy." Howley means, it's like white guy. And he goes, "Bombay, go away, Howley boy." And I had my lines. I was like, "Do you know abortion's legal?" Well, 17-year-old Howley kid in ugly PX clothes. He goes, "No, it's not." He didn't believe me. And I had to convince him. And I said, "Will you help me knock on doors next week?" And he said, "Yes." And so every free time I would go door to door. But what I didn't know is that the houses I was going to, the people that lived there, were migrant agriculture workers working in the sugarcane and pineapple fields who were not voters or really Americans yet. And I wasn't a good Christian boy, so when my captain heard this, it didn't make sense, because are there veterans in the room? You could explain this to the non-veterans. My first year, I had 3 Article 15s. Those are like misdemeanors to felonies, depending. So I was not a model soldier. I was scrappy. I'll just say that. Always getting into mischief. And so my captain hears that I'm going door to door. So he calls me and he goes, Jones, there's a rumor about you that cannot be true. I'm like, what's that, sir? They say you're harassing civilians about abortion in your off time. I said, I'm doing that, sir. He goes, what do you think you're going to accomplish by harassing migrants from the Philippines? Sidebar. Every door I knocked on, they were pro-life. Thank God that the first neighborhood's doors I decided to knock on were the most pious, beautiful, devout Catholics in the world. Because I was eager. Imagine if I started in Massachusetts, I'd have quit day one. But I thank God for that. All the time I think how things would have changed. But my captain said, you know, you're not going to get anywhere with that, Jones. You need a plan. I said, can we use a battalion and foment a coup and overthrow the government? That's the plan. There's a camera. That's a joke, camera. He said, you know, like at West Point, they taught me if you have a goal, you start with your goal, and you say, who could do that and how? And you work your way back one step. Who could get there and how? And you work your way back one step. And he goes, Jones, I want you to do that. Back to reach the worst soldier in my company, you, Private Jones. Give yourself 40 years, write a 40-year plan, and then work that plan forward for the rest of your life, and you will end abortion. And that emboldened me, and I went and wrote a radical plan. I'll run political campaigns, I'll write books, I'll make movies to change public opinion. Remember, at this point I was 19 by the time the captain found out and called me in. I was a 19-year-old E4 infantryman high school dropout in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, daydreaming about movies and political campaigns. And then I graduate, and then I get out of the Army, and I go to Leeward Community College, and I start the Pro-Life Student Union. We were saving so many babies that I didn't want to graduate. That's why it took me 3 years to get my associate's degree and 7 years to get my bachelor's. You don't believe me? Because I remember when I graduated, I was so sad. I thought I'll never be able to save a baby again. We were having so many saves that we knew about, and many that I didn't know about. I'll never forget. My first semester, I was taking a class with this Professor Pine, and his daughter is now actually a pro-life city councilwoman, and I think she's running for mayor soon, but Kim Pine in Hawaii. But I was taking his class in logic, and I would turn every class into basically an opportunity for me to, you know, engage my classmates on abortion. I'm sure most SFLA kids are like that. And these girls were whipping paper at my head telling me to shut up. And you know, it's very embarrassing when you're a freshman. Plus I was an infantryman, I was just out of the Army, a little awkward. And they're like, shut up, you know, stop talking about abortion. And I turned around and I said, I promise to each of you, I will not talk about abortion in this class again if you each promise me that you'll never have an abortion. Because that's the only reason I'm talking about it, is to put these ideas in your mind so none of my classmates would ever have an abortion. So the first two girls said real quick, I'll never have an abortion, now shut up. The third girl wasn't going to give it to me. She wasn't going to say it. I said, you know, 1 out of 3 American women have abortions, and you're going to have an abortion, and I'm very sorry for you. She goes, no, you know what, I'll never have an abortion, now shut up. And then about 2 years after I graduated, I was walking down the street in Waikiki, and I hear this girl call me from behind. I look, and immediately I recognize her. She's beautiful. I mean, she's this beautiful Hawaiian woman who is a filmmaker. I would like cast her to play Queen Liliuokalani. So beautiful. And she said, do you remember me? I said, of course I do. She goes, do you know, the next semester, I got pregnant. And my mother, my boyfriend's mother, and my boyfriend wanted me to have an abortion. And they forced me in the car. And they drove me to Planned Parenthood. And in the drive, I just kept hearing all your words banging around in my mind. And I thought of that promise. And she said, I want you to meet your promise. Because when they opened the door, I ran and caught the bus home. She said, meet your promise. And she turned, and there was her 5-year-old son. And I didn't want to graduate. But I'm glad that I had the experience to be pro-life in college. And then after college, I went into politics, was chief of staff for a state rep, and then in 1999, they asked me to be director of Hawaii Right to Life. And I remember at that point I thought, I'm so smart and hardworking, I'll end abortion in Hawaii this year. Then they'll fly me to Washington, that'll take 2 years. And I can still lead the Chicago Bears to the Super Bowl. This is gonna be good. Are there Packer fans in the room? You guys win too much to be bitter, get over it. I became director of Hawaii Right to Life. And you guys probably remember what we were doing in 1999. We were introducing legislation led by Senator Santorum, who courageously stood before America with those big cards. Do you guys remember those big cards? Showing America what partial birth abortion was. That was the first major swing toward our side in polling on abortion since Roe, thanks to Senator Santorum. And we introduced this legislation to ban one procedure in the 3rd trimester, and it went into committee. And the committee woman said to me, Jason, I'll never hear that bill. And I thought, oh, I knew you'd say that. We're going to canvass your district. We canvassed your district. I had all these students. We canvassed your district. I had everyone, including her husband, her children, and her parents, sign my petition. And I took my petition and I put it on her desk and I said, Representative Oakland, you're going to sign my petition now. And she said, oh, Jason, you're really hardworking. I appreciate that. But I'm never going to let that bill onto the floor. She didn't. Now I've been doing this for 9 years, 10 years at this point. And I called Ambassador Alan Keyes. You guys know Ambassador Alan Keyes, President Reagan's ambassador to the UN and a great pro-life hero. I called Dr. Keyes. I said, Dr. Keyes, I'm wasting my life. I'm director of Hawaii Right to Life, chief of staff for a state representative. I have a radio show. And I can't even get one little bill onto the floor to do one little ban of one little procedure. I'm wasting my life. And Dr. Key said, the darker the world becomes, the farther your light will shine. Just pray. And I was so angry, because I was an atheist still. And I said, Dr. Keyes, thank you so much for that great advice. Click. Christians are so stupid. Pray. Really? That's your answer? Telling me to pray, that's like telling a vegan to eat a hamburger to get rid of a headache. So this is not going to work. But I was so angry, this was my prayer. I said, God, if you exist, and I don't believe you're real, and if you're real, I don't like you. Because I don't see you. All horrible things happen in the world. I'm fighting abortion, I'm not even good. And it's me and 3 old ladies with no money in a little office. I don't see you. If you want me to acknowledge you, all-knowing, all-powerful God, I need 3 things. Rich people, famous people, and powerful people. Have them stand up for life, and I'll serve them, but I don't see them. Where are they, Almighty God? That was my prayer. Do you know, today I thought about that prayer again. I think about that prayer a lot. When I was in my room watching Unplanned on Fox News, tracking to be the #4 movie in America today. I would have never imagined, and you would have never imagined, a former Planned Parenthood Employee of the Year partnering with Hollywood to rock the world for the child in the womb. Unimaginable. God answers the prayers of atheists. For me, I can't even know how it happened. Somehow I went from Hawaii to DC. And then we made a little movie called Bella that went on to win the most prestigious film festival in the world, the Toronto International Film Festival, tripled its production budget and ticket sales. But what we're most proud of is our goal was to know the name of one baby that was born because of our movie. We stopped counting like 8 years ago when we received our 1,000th message from a woman who was scheduled to have an abortion, saw our movie, and chose life. And I tell you, many of these Bella moms are on my Facebook feed. They're my friends. And I get to watch their daughters and their sons grow up before my very eyes. And that is a very, very, very beautiful thing. This movie Unplanned is in theaters now. And I really think that it has the potential to be what I call the Uncle Tom's Cabin of the abortion issue. But I have a worry about the success of this film. Because Uncle Tom's Cabin came out in 1852, and slavery wasn't abolished until 1863? 1864? 5? I agree with you. 5. Do I hear 6? 5. I'm on Hawaii time. I'm tired. There you go. I'm afraid that we're too confident in the power of film. As a guy who's a filmmaker and has been arguing for film to change culture, this film is rocking the culture and changing the culture. But its success is on the backs of the pro-life movement. In many ways, the success of this film is on the back of Students for Life of America, just like Uncle Tom's Cabin was on the backs of the abolitionist movement. The abolitionists bought so many copies of Uncle Tom's Cabin, they gave it out, that it was the best-selling book of the 19th century, with only one exception, the Bible, where there were more copies. If not for the abolitionists, nobody would have ever heard of Uncle Tom's Cabin. If not for the pro-life movement, we wouldn't know about Unplanned. And we need to work very hard for 10 years, 15 years, maybe a little more. My plan says 2031, November 18th. You can write that down. But you need your own plan. I want to share a story. I want to close with a story. I've been doing a documentary on the rise and fall of ISIS. We've been shooting it since the rise of ISIS. We've been back and forth to Iraq and Syria. And our work is done because, practically speaking, in Iraq and Syria, ISIS is destroyed. Thank you, President Trump. Thank you to the Kurds. Thank you to the Peshmerga. And when ISIS was at its height of power, I was traveling with the Kurdish militia, the Kurdish soldiers, the Peshmerga. They're Muslims, and I was witnessing them fighting and dying for their other Kurds, for the Chaldeans, for the Assyrians, and for the Yazidi. And as they were pushing ISIS back, and we were going through town, smoldering village after smoldering village, the Yazidi fathers would follow the Peshmerga, hoping to be reunited with their daughters. And one of the most beautiful things I ever saw in my life was while I was with a small Peshmerga unit, they returned a girl to her father. And the Peshmerga, by the way, they look like us, middle-aged guys. Like, a lot of them are our age, my age. They got, little bellies. They have beat-up old trucks with old AK-47s. They don't look like Navy SEALs. And they don't have the best equipment in the world. And I was looking at this group of men, looking out towards ISIS, as this father was with his daughter. And I remember I breathed in deep, and I said, Lord, thank you for allowing me to breathe the same air as these men. Thank you for giving me the privilege to be able to look at them. And I just looked at them. And I thought the only thing that stands between a violent ideology and the destruction of this man and his daughter are these men. That's it. And I feel the same way when I look at you. Because there is a violent ideology that seeks to destroy your children, your grandchildren, not only in the womb, but to destroy their moral imagination and their mind out of the womb. And the only thing that stands between that violent ideology and your children is this movement. And Students for Life of America, and this isn't hyperbole, and I've been in the movement for 30 years, is the vanguard and the most important organization in the pro-life movement. I remember having this big feeling of relief. You're going to think I'm a megalomaniac, but until about 2012, I believed that if not for me and what I'm going to do, and I'm doing, abortion in this country will never end. I thought that. It's crazy. I think a lot of us think that. We take this personal responsibility very seriously. When I went to a national pro-life student event in Washington, D.C. when I was in college, it was held at Catholic University, in a little classroom with about 20 students, and a very famous national speaker who sat in his chair and didn't even bother to stand up to give us a speech. And I went home kind of dejected from that experience. 2012, I was at an SFLA event in Washington, D.C. that looked like the Oscars. It was so well produced, so well organized, and there were thousands of young people. And they were being treated the way they deserved to be treated. Because here's what I can promise you. People go, oh, you're so brave being in the entertainment industry and standing up for abortion. It takes no courage at all for me, right? Film is an instrument for me to promote life. The worst things I'll ever get is a dirty look at a party, and that's not that bad. The courage that these young women and men have who stand up for life, not really from just the students, but from the administrators and the faculty, an unbelievable hostility that 17, 18, and 19-year-old young men and women, the courage they have to stand up for the child in the womb is unbelievable. And I don't think today at my age that I would have the courage under that kind of pressure not to buckle, and they do not buckle. They do not buckle. When you think about the Covington Catholic boys, I thought about why were they attacked? And the Catholic anthropologist Rene Girard boils the gospel down to one thing. He says we are called to stand in solidarity with the victim that the gods of the city seek to destroy. Of course, Christ on the cross. But every age has its great victim. And the victim that we target today is the child in the womb. But Rene Girard said, but you need to know something. When you stand in solidarity with the victim against the gods of your city, you become indistinguishable from the victim to the mob. And all of the anger and hatred that goes towards that victim will also fall on to you. And I think that is very true. And so the young men and women at Students for Life of America are really, when you meet them, are the most heroic people. We don't have to go back in a time machine to meet the most beautiful heroes, because every age has its heroes that stand against the ideology of evil of their age. And when the history books are written about the 21st century, and what Kristen Hawkins said is true, the pro-life movement is, provably so, the largest social movement in the history of the world. But where we have failed as a movement, not for lack of trying, but because it's challenging, reaching into universities and high schools, Students for Life of America has succeeded. When I was 16, I dreamt my whole life of doing nothing but protecting my children from the types of abuse and chaos that my siblings and I had. That's all I dreamt about. And I failed to protect my own first child, even out of the womb. And so when I tell you that my gratitude to you is personal, it is very personal. And I thank you. Thank you for supporting Students for Life. And this isn't just another organization that you're supporting. I want you to take personal ownership of this organization and make it a regular part of the apostolate you support and make it a part of your life. I failed to stand up and protect my daughter, but I committed I will never fail again. Thank you.